Before clocks, before calendars, before anyone had a word for Monday, humans were already being hunted by time. Not the kind of time glowing on a phone, not hours, minutes, or seconds. Something older, the return of winter, the movement of animals, the swelling of rivers, the ripening of fruit, the changing face of the moon, the moment when the sky shifted and the world stopped giving food. Most animals live inside time, without measuring it. They sleep when they are tired. They move when they are hungry. They mate when the season pulls them forward. But humans did something different. We started counting it. We scratched marks into bone. We watched shadows crawl across the ground. We followed the moon as it disappeared and returned. We waited for certain stars to rise. We built pits, stones, temples, towers, calendars, and machines just to answer one ancient question. When will it happen again? That is the strange thing about time. It was always there. The sun always rose. The moon always changed. The seasons always returned. But at some point, humans stopped simply living through those cycles and started tracking them. And once we did that, everything changed. Hunting changed. Farming changed. Religion changed. Power changed. Work changed. Even fear changed. Because the moment humans learned to count time, the future became something they could prepare for, but also something they could worry about. So why did humans start counting time? The answer begins long before clocks, long before cities, long before writing. It begins with survival. Imagine an ancient group standing under a sky, with no calendar and no written record. They do not know the word January. They do not know what a year is, but they know the world has patterns. The moon grows, disappears, and returns. Animals migrate through certain valleys. Fish appear in rivers at certain moments. Plants fruit and then vanish. Rain comes, then stops. Cold arrives, then kills. If you miss the right moment, you do not just lose time. You lose food. You lose movement. You lose safety. You may lose the entire group. So the first timekeepers were not philosophers. They were not scientists in white coats. They were survivors trying to remember when the world gave them what they needed. If you lived in a world with no writing, how would you remember that the animals return after a certain number of moons? You would count, and if memory was not enough, you would mark the count somewhere outside your own body. Some of the oldest possible clues are notched bones. Objects like the Lebombo bone from southern Africa and the Ishango bone from Central Africa carry rows of marks that may have been used for counting. Some researchers have suggested these marks may have tracked lunar cycles, though the interpretation is debated. And that caution matters. We cannot look at every ancient scratch and confidently call it a calendar. Sometimes a mark is a count. Sometimes it is decoration. Sometimes it is something we will never understand. But the deeper point remains. Long before writing, humans were already making marks to hold information outside the mind. A memory carved into bone. A number that did not disappear when the person who counted it fell asleep. That may be one of the earliest revolutions in human history. Not the invention of time, the invention of remembering time. If you draw the first map of human timekeeping, the earliest clues appear in Africa, Southern Africa, Central Africa, bone, marks, memory. The beginning is not a clock, it is a scratch. Now move the map north, to Scotland. At Warren Field in Aberdeenshire, archaeologists found a row of pits dating to around 8000 BC. The site has been interpreted as a hunter-gatherer calendar, possibly a way of tracking lunar months while correcting the calendar with the midwinter sunrise. That detail matters because the moon is beautiful, but it is not perfectly obedient. A lunar month is about 29.5 days. 12 lunar months give you about 354 days. But the solar year is about 365 days. That leaves a gap of about 11 days every year. If you only follow the moon, your calendar slowly drifts away from the seasons. After enough time, the month that once meant winter no longer matches winter. The sky lies by being slightly uneven, so humans had to solve a difficult problem. They had to make the moon and the sun agree. Warren Field may show that hunter-gatherers were already thinking about this, thousands of years before formal calendars in the great river civilizations. These were not city people. They were not kings. They were not bureaucrats. They were people who needed to know when the seasons were turning. When will the animals move? When will plants return? When will the darkness begin to shrink? When will winter loosen its grip? This is where time stopped being only memory. It became a structure in the landscape. People were no longer just watching the sky. They were building places that helped them remember it. So on the map, place a line from Africa to Scotland, from carved bone to carved earth, from counting marks to a calendar built into the ground. Now move the map south, to the desert of Egypt. At Nabta Playa, in the Nubian desert, ancient people placed stones in ways that some researchers interpret as tracking the summer solstice and the arrival of seasonal rains. The exact meaning of the site is still debated, but the idea behind it is powerful. In a dry landscape, knowing when rain might return is not abstract knowledge. It is survival. A star, a sunrise, a shadow, or a stone alignment could become a warning. The wet season is near. Move the animals, prepare the camp, return to water. The sky became a map, and time became a matter of life and death. That is one of the oldest reasons humans watch the heavens. Not because the stars were far away, but because the stars told them what was about to happen here. A person looked upward at a star, but what they were really asking about was grass, water, cattle, food, children, survival. Timekeeping began as a bridge between the sky and the stomach. Then came farming, and everything became more urgent. Hunter-gatherers needed timing, but farmers were trapped by it. Plant too early, and frost or drought could destroy the crop. Plant too late, and the harvest might fail. Miss the flood, miss the rain, miss the season, and the year could become hunger. Farming turned time into a system of consequences. The seed had to enter the earth at the right moment. The harvest had to come before rot, heat, flood, or cold. Food had to be stored before the hungry season arrived. Suddenly, the future was not just something to notice. It had to be managed. This is why calendars became so important in early civilizations. They were not just tools for knowing dates. They were tools for controlling survival. In ancient Egypt, timekeeping became tied to the Nile. Every year, the river flooded and renewed the land. That flood made Egypt possible. But people needed to anticipate it. The Egyptians watched the sky, especially the return of Sirius, the bright star connected with the coming flood season. Over time, they organized the year into seasons of flooding, growing, and harvest. Egyptian time became agricultural. It became religious. It became political. If you could predict the flood, you could organize labor. If you could organize labor, you could build. If you could build, you could rule. This is where counting time became power. Because the person who knows the calendar can tell everyone else when to plant, when to gather, when to pay, when to worship, and when to work. Do you think calendars were invented only to help people survive? Or were they also invented so someone could organize and control them? Now stay in Egypt, but zoom in from the year to the day. At first, humans counted big cycles: moons, seasons, floods, years. But eventually, they began cutting the day itself into pieces. The day was obvious. The sun rises, the sun sets. But the hour was an invention. Ancient Egyptians used shadows to divide daylight. Obelisks and shadow clocks turned sunlight into measurable parts. By around 1500 BC, Egyptian shadow clocks could divide the sunlit day into sections. Morning was no longer just morning. Afternoon was no longer just afternoon. The day could be measured, compared, organized. The Egyptians also divided night using stars known as decans, and water clocks helped measure time when the sun was gone. That was a major change, because the sun is easy, night is harder. In darkness, there is no shadow to watch, so water dripping from a vessel became a substitute for the sky. Drop by drop, darkness became measurable. Think about what that means. Humans were no longer only counting days. They were cutting the day into smaller pieces. The world did not ask to be divided into hours. Humans did that. And once the day could be divided, people could be scheduled, work could be organized, rituals could be timed, courts could meet, priests could perform ceremonies at the correct moment, armies could move. The hour was not just a measurement, it was a tool for coordination. Now move the map east, to Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Here, time became paperwork. The Sumerians and Babylonians developed complex systems for counting, astronomy, and calendars. Their months followed the moon. A new month began with the first visible crescent. But lunar months did not fit perfectly into the solar year, so extra months had to be added from time to time, to keep the calendar aligned with the seasons. This required observation, records, priests, astronomers, scribes, people who watched the sky and turned it into rules. And from Mesopotamia came one of the strangest things still living in your pocket right now. Base 60, the sexagesimal system. The reason an hour has 60 minutes. The reason a minute has 60 seconds. The reason a circle has 360 degrees. This did not come from modern science. It came from ancient number systems developed thousands of years ago. 60 was useful because it could be divided cleanly by many numbers. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. That made it powerful for calculation, trade, astronomy, and measurement. So when you look at a clock and see time cut into 60 parts, you are looking at a fossil from ancient Mesopotamia. A mathematical ghost still running your day. Your phone is modern. Your watch is modern. But the numbers underneath them are ancient. Every minute you count is carrying a system thousands of years old. Now move the map west again, to Ireland. At Newgrange, a passage tomb built more than 5,000 years ago, the winter solstice sunrise enters through a small opening above the doorway and lights the inner chamber. For most of the year, that chamber stays dark. Then, around the shortest days of the year, the sun returns and reaches into the stone. This was not an accident. It was architecture built around a moment in time. Stone became a way to hold a sunrise. Darkness became a stage for the return of light. Now move to Britain, to Stonehenge. Built in stages across the Neolithic and Bronze Age, Stonehenge was aligned with the movements of the sun, especially the solstices. We still do not know every purpose it served, but it clearly shows that people were willing to move enormous stones to mark relationships between earth and sky. That is the thing about time. Once humans began measuring it, they did not keep it small. They built monuments for it. They carved it into landscapes. They organized labor around it. They made the sky permanent in stone. A sunrise happens in a moment, but a monument lets that moment return forever. Every year, the sun comes back to the same place. Every year, the stones remember. And this is where counting time becomes emotional. It is not only about crops and clocks. It is about fear. Humans count time because time takes things from us. It takes summer. It takes childhood. It takes youth. It takes people. It takes entire lives. But by counting it, we make it feel less wild. We cannot stop it, but we can mark it, name it, predict it, celebrate it, divide it, return to it. That is why birthdays matter, why anniversaries matter, why New Year's matter, why people count days since someone died, days until someone returns, days until harvest, days until war, days until a child is born. Counting time gives shape to waiting, and waiting is one of the most human things we do. The hunter waits for migration, the farmer waits for rain, the priest waits for the star, the mother waits for birth, the grieving wait for pain to change. The entire human story is full of waiting, and counting time was how we survived the waiting. But then calendars became more than survival. They became civilization. In Rome, the calendar became politics. The old Roman calendar drifted and had to be controlled by officials. Then Julius Caesar reformed it in 45 BC, creating the Julian calendar with a year of 365 days and a leap day added every 4 years. This was not just a technical correction. It was power written onto time. A ruler could change the calendar and change the rhythm of public life. Centuries later, even that calendar drifted. So the Gregorian calendar corrected it again. Time was no longer just watched, it was governed. Then, much later, clocks became machines. In medieval towns, mechanical clocks appeared in towers. They rang bells over cities. People no longer needed to watch the sun directly. The town could hear time. The bell told people when to wake, pray, work, meet, trade, and stop. Time moved from the sky to the tower, then from the tower to the pocket, then from the pocket to the wrist, then from the wrist to the phone. And with every step, time moved closer to the body. But the biggest change came when time stopped being local. For most of history, every town had its own noon. Noon was when the sun stood highest above that place. That worked when people moved slowly. But railways broke local time. A train could not run safely if every town had a different clock. So countries began standardizing time. In 1884, the International Meridian Conference chose Greenwich as the prime meridian for global reference. Time became global. Not the time of your village, not the time of your shadow, the time of a system, a world schedule. That was the final transformation. Ancient humans counted time to survive nature. Modern humans standardized time to survive each other. And there was a cost. Before calendars, time was mostly something the world did. After calendars, time became something humans owed. A season became a duty. A day became a schedule. An hour became a demand. Once time could be measured, it could be owned. By temples, by kings, by employers, by empires, by machines, by the clock on your wall. The same invention that helped humans survive also taught humans to feel late. That is the strange trade. Counting time gave us agriculture, cities, rituals, astronomy, history, wages, travel, science, and civilization. But it also gave us deadlines, aging, schedules, regret, the feeling that life is running out. Ancient humans started counting time because they needed to know when the world would change, but eventually, counting time changed them. It made the future visible. It made memory durable. It made society organized. It turned the sky into a calendar, the shadow into an hour, the moon into a month, and the year into a story. So the next time you look at a clock, remember what you are really seeing. Not just numbers, not just seconds, not just a device telling you where to be. You are looking at one of the oldest human fears made visible. The fear of missing the moment, the fear of hunger, the fear of winter, the fear of forgetting, the fear that everything passes unless someone counts it. Before humans counted time, the world moved in cycles. After humans counted time, life became something that could be remembered, planned, measured, and lost. And maybe that is why we still do it. Because every calendar is a promise that the future can be prepared for. Every clock is an attempt to hold a world that keeps moving. And every mark humans ever carved into bone, earth, stone, shadow, water, or paper was saying the same thing. Something happened. Something is coming, and we need to be ready.